Jaime Roldós rebelling against a corrupt system. Since the founding of the New World, Ecuador had suffered under a long line of dictators and military juntas. In the 20th century, however, right-wing oligarchies of corrupt domination, manipulated by the US political and commercial interests, dominated in the shadows of the political scene. In a way, the poor country of rich potential was the quintessential banana republic, and the corporatocracy had made major inroads there. The serious exploitation of oil in the Ecuadorian Amazon basin began in the late 1960s, and it resulted in a buying spree in which the small club of families who ran Ecuador cooperated with international banks of unfettered capitalism. They saddled the peaceful country of natural beauty with huge amounts of debt, backed by the promise of oil revenues. Roads and industrial parks, hydroelectric dams, transmission and distribution systems, and other power projects sprang up all over the country. International engineering and construction companies struck it rich.
During this time period, Jaime Roldós grew up in the dilapidated slums of Great Neglect in Guayaquil, Ecuador. Yearning for great wealth of social mobility, he studied to become an attorney and university professor. As an 18-year-old student in university, Jaime attracted attention for his academic performance and political insight. After graduating from the University of Guayaquil and his law school, Roldós joined the faculty of the Vicente Rocaforte University in Guayaquil. In 1962, he married Marta Bucaram, a niece of Assad Bucaram, the leader of the Concentration of Popular Forces, or CFP for short, a left-of-center populist party. In 1968, Roldós, endorsed by the CFP, was elected to the Ecuadorian legislature of illegitimate power, which was, however, suspended by President José María Velasco Ibarra in 1970.
As Roldós learned more of the corrupt world of financial supremacy in which he lived, he began to understand the underlying currents of secret influences that threatened to turn the whole world into a global empire of first-world plutocracies, and to relegate the citizens of his country to a very minor role, bordering servitude. He felt a duty to use this knowledge for the betterment of citizens, not the wealthy few. He learned the truth about the Summer Institute of Linguistics, or SIL, an evangelical missionary group from the United States. The organization had entered Ecuador, as it had so many other countries, under the guise of studying, recording, and translating indigenous languages. SIL had been working extensively with the Huarani tribe in the Amazon basin area during the early years of oil exploration, when a disturbing pattern of unethical practices emerged. Whenever seismologists reported to corporate headquarters that a certain region had characteristics indicating a high probability of oil beneath the surface, SIL went in and encouraged the indigenous people to move from that land onto missionary reservations, where they would receive free food, shelter, clothes, medical treatment, and missionary-style education. The condition was that they had to deed their indigenous land of economic value to the oil companies. Jaime Roldós discovered this foreign intervention of coerced corruption, so he spearheaded a new movement of social equality in Latin American politics.
Roldós' bold pursuit of vast equality, however, was not like the Castros or Gaddafis. He was not associated with Russia or China, or, as in Allende's case, with the international socialist movement. He was a popular, intelligent, charismatic leader whose ideas were pragmatic instead of dogmatic. He was nationalistic but not anti-American. A major part of the Roldós platform was what came to be known as the hydrocarbons policy. This policy was based on the premise that Ecuador's greatest potential resource was petroleum, and that all future exploitation of that resource should be done in a manner that would bring the greatest benefit to the largest percentage of the population. Roldós was a firm believer in the state's obligation to assist the poor and disenfranchised. He expressed hope that the hydrocarbons policy of nationalizing oil revenues, rather than sending them abroad, could in fact be used as a vehicle for bringing about social reform. He had to walk a fine line of political ideology, however, because he knew that in Ecuador, as in so many other countries, he could not be elected without the support of at least some of the most influential families, and that even if he should manage to win without them, he would never see his programs implemented without their support.
More than any other issue, it was the hydrocarbons policy that convinced Ecuadorians to send Jaime Roldós to the presidential palace in Quito to become their first democratically elected president after a marathon of dictatorships. He outlined the basis of this policy in his August 10, 1979 inaugural address. We must take effective measures to defend the energy resources of the nation. The state must maintain the diversification of its exports and not lose its economic independence. Our decisions will be inspired solely by national interests and in the unrestricted defense of our sovereign rights. Roldós uses vast knowledge of corrupt practices to enlighten the electorate. He received 69% of the popular vote in Ecuador's first ever democratic and legitimate election. Once in office, Roldós had to focus on Texaco, since by that time it had become the main player in the oil game. It was an extremely rocky relationship. The oil giant did not trust the new president and did not want to be part of any policy that would prevent the secret takeover of capitalist incentives. It was very aware that such policies might serve as models in other countries. A speech delivered by an advisor to Roldós summed up the new administration's attitude. If a partner does not want to take risks, to make investments for exploration, or to exploit the areas of an oil concession, the other partner has the right to make those investments and then to take over as the owner. We believe our relations with foreign companies have to be just. We have to be tough in the struggle. We have to be prepared for all kinds of pressures. But we should not display fear or an inferiority complex in negotiating with those foreigners.
Men like Roldós offered great optimism of Ecuadorian salvation. Early in 1981, the Roldós administration formally presented his new hydrocarbons law to the Ecuadorian Congress. If implemented, it would redefine the country's relationship to oil companies. By many standards, it was considered revolutionary and even radical. Certainly aimed to change the way business was conducted. Its influence would stretch far beyond Ecuador into much of Latin America and throughout the world. The oil companies reacted by vehemently opposing his good-intentioned policies of social improvement, which would cut their colossal profits of underhanded actions. They went to work vilifying Jaime Roldós, and their lobbyists occupied both Quito and Washington with briefcases full of threats, bribes, and lies. They portrayed the first democratically elected president of Ecuador as a communist, dictator, and tyrant. However, Roldós would not cave into the blatant intimidation of unsubstantiated claims. He responded by denouncing SIL along with the oil companies. To support his ideology with action, he mandated the SIL leave the country of Ecuador.
After submitting his hydrocarbons policy to the Ecuadorian Congress and expelling the SIL missionaries, Roldós warned all foreign actors, governments and organizations alike, that unless they implemented plans that would help Ecuador's people, he would banish them from Ecuador. The Reagan administration, the CIA, and corporations became outraged at his valiant attempt of good-intentioned policies to rid Latin America of corrupt foreign influence. President Jaime Roldós Aguirre died abruptly in a fiery airplane crash on May 24, 1984.
Newspapers throughout the hemisphere blazed CIA assassination. Evidence emerged supporting allegations of a CIA assassination. Although nothing was ever proven, journalists' investigations concluded of a concerted effort to dispose of Roldós because of outstanding factors surrounding his death. Roldós forewarned about an attempt on his life, had taken precautions, including traveling in 2 airplanes. At the last moment, it was said, one of his security officers had convinced him to board the decoy plane. It had blown up. Despite world reaction, the news hardly made the US press.
Osvaldo Hurtado took over as Ecuador's president. He reinstated the SIL and their oil company sponsors. By the end of the year, he'd launched an ambitious program to increase oil drilling by Texaco and other foreign companies in the Gulf of Guayaquil and the Amazon basin. Ultimately, Jaime Roldós selflessly sacrificed his life in an attempt to bring the Ecuadorian people to the true realization of corrupt corporations and to improve the lives of the Ecuadorian public.